Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our presentation. I know, sadly, we all wish that we were in beautiful Australia, but this will do. And I would love to introduce our group, our Palmer Research Group. We are presenting on culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, a new framework for music education. And we're so happy to be here. So who are we? 4 of our 5 team members are here. We can all wave. I want to introduce Liz Palmer, Jason Vodicka, who sadly cannot be with us today, but he is a very large integral part of our research team. Tina Huynh, myself, Christine D'Alexander, and Lisa Crawford. And we all hail from different parts of the United States as well. Liz is currently in California. Jason is in Maryland. Tina is in Washington. I am in Illinois, and Lisa is also in California. So as we look at culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally relevant teaching, we are finding that there's a great span of knowledge, from not really understanding what that is yet to those that are looking to see how this can correlate to the classroom, community, and beyond. So as we do an overview of our presentation, I just need to move my boxes a little around. We'll be going through what some of the pedagogies look like already, including a brief literature review, looking at some of the real world implementations and common threads amongst CRT. And then we'll also be presenting what our framework is for culturally relevant and responsive music teaching. It's a mouthful. We've added our own mouthful of acronym FCRRMT. And from there, we'll be going through the 4 quadrants that we have ready to present and looking at access points and pathways for that, along with some of the holistic and comparative music lesson ideas, action-based reflective plans, and some personal action plans as well.
Hi, everyone. So let's start off by talking about what culturally relevant and responsive teaching is. So this type of teaching has been around for about 40 years. There have been several iterations of it, but the most popularized term comes from Gloria Ladson-Billings in 1995, where she talked about culturally relevant and responsive teaching is a teaching methodology that focuses on the academic achievement of students, developing the cultural competence, as well as their socio-political consciousness. By looking at each 3 of these tenets, we're talking about students making sure that they have they continue their academic growth, they're in cultural competence, that they're gaining knowledge within their own culture as well as at least one other culture, and then socio-political consciousness, that they are able to take action by analyzing and solving real world problems. In her own words, Gloria Ladson-Billings has said, culturally relevant and responsive music teaching and learning is not a drop-in moment. It is the whole experience, the whole time, for every student and teacher. So as we were developing this framework, or trying to tackle the question, what does culturally relevant and responsive teaching mean for music teaching and learning, we realized that there was a common thread. Throughout the pedagogy, it's necessary to capitalize on student experiences and cultural connections in order to make meaningful learning opportunities that honor the students' lived experiences. There are very few examples of culturally relevant and responsive teaching in music. Culturally relevant, responsive, and sustaining teaching appears more frequently in general education research, but the topic is gaining more traction in music teaching and learning. As stated earlier, there have been many iterations of culturally relevant, responsive, sustaining pedagogies over the last 40 years. Regarding music, there are 3 frameworks for culturally relevant and responsive music teaching. These include Shaw 2012 and 2016, where that pedagogy centers mostly on culturally significant repertoire and curricular choices. Lyndon McCoy discussed the relationship building as the crux of cultural relevance. The new framework by Palmer, Vodicka, Huynh, D'Alexander, and Crawford in 2021 connects teacher competencies, curriculum, student relationships, cultural knowledge, and community for a holistic cultural learning experience. Similar frameworks to culturally relevant and responsive music teaching include Abrams' 2005 and 2017 Critical Pedagogy for Music Education, Hess's 2015 Anti-Racist Music Education, and Hess's 2020 Activist Music Education. The framework for culturally relevant and responsive music teaching is anchored to Gloria Ladson-Billings' 3 tenets of student achievement, cultural competence, and socio-political consciousness, as well as connection to the community.
As a reminder, real-world implementation reminders for culturally relevant and responsive teaching. Number 1, fully understand the model that you are using. There are several models out there, and whatever model you choose to use it with integrity. Number 2, advocate for training or experience in pre and in teacher training. And there are a lot of webinars, and there are a lot of opportunities to learn more. There are books and articles, so do those opportunities to learn more about culturally relevant and responsive teaching. Number 3, follow with fidelity, socio-political awareness, and connect to. And we might say that promoting socio-political awareness is something that is often left out in teaching when teachers are doing their best to implement culturally responsive and relevant teaching. We'd like to now introduce to you the work for culturally relevant and responsive music teaching that we've put together as a team. And we'll go through a graphic that we've created for you and as quadrants. You see here, the first quadrant is at the upper left-hand corner, teacher competencies, and there are different bullet points that will go into detail about each of these quadrants. The second quadrant is informed choices over to the right on the top. And then we go down to the bottom right, authenticity. And then we'll move over to the fourth quadrant, which is holistic and comparative on the lower left. And in the middle there, you'll see that these 4 quadrants or areas of culturally relevant responsive music teaching are connected by Ladson-Billings 3 tenets of student achievement, cultural consciousness, and socio-political action. And in the very there, we weren't able to make light for you to see, but you see a little glimpse there. All of these quadrants and goals are connected by community involvement. It's very important to keep the community in mind and the students in mind and their cultural contexts. The first quadrant, teacher competencies, includes cultural competence, decentralizing Western art music, community engagement, and having open disposition, checking one's biases, and having a facilitator role rather than a teacher-centered role. Examples that you might see here in each of those previous bullets are held here for your help here. Cultural competence includes humility, hospitality, understanding of other cultural norms, and seeing yourself as the other. Decentering Western art music are curricular choices outside of Western art music classical traditions. Interrogate biases. Where are your biases and blind spots? How might you overcome them? Creating opportunities to bring out new musical opportunities. Below that, playing the facilitator role. Students have a role in sharing information. So opening up to the floor to them and letting them also lead learning is a key part of cultural relevant and step out the teacher learning. And then over here at the end on the right side, community engagement. What musical opportunities exist in the school community? Participating and participating in cultural exchanges throughout the Canadian school are part of also, we'll say CRRT for culturally and responsive.
Quadrant 2 is about informed choices. This is the quadrant that aligns with choices that teachers make when drafting curriculum or creating lesson plans, and includes repertoire selection, connection to lived experiences, culture-specific ensembles, context-driven choices, moves with the community involvement in the center, and all of the student achievement, cultural consciousness, and sociopolitical action. Repertoire selection honors students' heritage and oral traditions. Connection to lived experiences is related to what is happening in students' lives. Culture-specific ensembles, this modern band, gamelan, steel pan, go-go, mariachi. Social political relevance is related to what issues are important to students. How are their lives negatively impacted? Are they dealing with homelessness, food insecurity, homophobia, transphobia, racism, systemic injustice, among other things? How can they be supported? How can we lift them up? Where are the intersections of race, class, gender, disability, ethnicity, nation in the discourse? And where do these items fit in? And finally, context-driven choices. Are the choices you make contextual? In what ways? Are the students being served?
So when we look at quadrant 3, we're looking at authenticity. And this involves contextual performance, honest valuation and appreciation. What is the nuanced style and interpretation? And then also the notation and oral learning. Looking closer with authenticity, excuse me, when we're focusing on contextual performances, for example, is the performance, the repertoire, the clothing, is it appropriate for the situation? And how can we provide the context for students and audience members? In honest valuation of music, accepting music as is and value based on what is present in music versus what is the missing from the music. With nuanced style and interpretation, looking at applying the correct performance practice, and an integrated oral and notational learning, a balance between reading notation and oral learning hand in hand, and assessing whether notation, assessing when notation versus oral learning is appropriate. Our quadrant 4, holistic comparative lessons. This is focusing on polycultural and polymusical musics, community involvement, which is really such a heart of everything that we're all doing as music educators, cultural scaffolding, multifaceted and non-additive, and notational and oral learning lessons. Looking closer, and we're going to share a clip here as well. For some of the examples of holistic and comparative music lessons, when we're looking at polycultural and polymusical with students learning and understanding and really moving and shifting through cultural and musical contexts. And then also with community involvement, the community is always welcome. There are numerous meaningful cultural exchanges that take place within a classroom of students and within the community at large. In tandem, working with actual cultural bearers, those that have known and who live in this, and forming and sustaining genuine relationships with those that are working together. Looking at cultural scaffolding, students sharing cultural knowledge with one another, with educators, with their teachers, their peers, their mentors, and students in leadership roles where they really are the experts as they are lived experiences, lived beings of all that this entails. Using non-additive approaches and using teaching through musical connections, thinking about how music is actually connected and where do musics diverge. And with musical diasporas, how has music traveled and transformed over time? And so to take a break from us speaking, we wanted to share just a small, about a minute and a half example of a really interesting and really neat comparative lesson introducing basic theory. And I suggest too, if you have time to watch the entire video. We won't be sharing all of it right now.
Music is a universal language. Everyone can relate to it. Let me give you an interesting example. Ting 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 ting. Ting 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 ting. It sounds very Chinese. Now. Sounds very Hindustani classical. Sounds very Carnatic. Sounds very Western. 4 different musical experiences. You will ask, is there any commonality between them? Well, if you listen to it carefully, you will realize that the tune for all the 4 music pieces was exactly the same. But then what was different? The way in which the tune was interpreted by different cultures was the difference. And that is why you got 4 different and distinct musical experiences. Music and food are so similar in nature. Now take for
Definitely continue because you're going to want to learn more about that. Excuse me.
What do we do with all this information? So the framework for culturally relevant and responsive music teaching, we've devised an action plan for practical application. So the action plan allows teachers, practitioners to look at all 4 quadrants and have a component that they want to explore, learn more about as a way of changing their own teaching styles and methodology. So in the action plan, you're looking at the basic instructions of you will explore all 4 quadrants and create an action plan for your professional development and curricular choices. Step 1, review each quadrant and components within the quadrant. In each quadrant, identify 1 component you wish to personally implement. And this is part of step 2, for quadrant 1, I always suggest that people start with interrogating their personal biases or developing their cultural competence. Step 3, you will, for each component, you will identify 3 to 5 steps for implementation. And then lastly, step 4, provide a rationale for your choice and the steps you created. This will help keep you honest and on your pathway, on your journey to becoming more relevant, culturally relevant and responsive.
So in conclusion, we want to, of course, say thank you so much for attending. And we would be happy to continue conversations if any of you are interested in learning more about what we are working on. You may visit the website on the computer. Otherwise, please send us an email. And just as a side note too, we are currently working on a pilot study regarding this area of research, and you'll be hearing more from us in the future. So with that, thank you so much. And we have hope that you have a pleasant morning, afternoon, evening, and that we all get together in Finland in 2 years together. So thank you.